Okay, welcome everyone. We'll get started with today's meeting. The agenda is in the chat. Those of you listening in on YouTube, please let us know when you see us as live. We'll get started. Testing and release updates. As for testing, I think generally stable, although I think Mehdi will give us an update in a moment on some work that he's been leading. As for release, I do have a pending release on GitHub with some minor clarifications and changes. I think specifically clarify some things in the last update about subnets and some other stuff. I'm looking to get that out as soon as possible. I don't think that might change one test vector. But I'll let y'all know that is coming. Other than that, I think good. Mehdi has an update for us today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Danny. Hi, everyone. So, as some of you may have seen in Danny's update, Sigma Prime has been awarded a grant from the Ethereum Foundation to continue the work on Beacon Fuzz, our differential fuzzer. Very excited to keep contributing to the E2 security ecosystem beyond, I guess, our work on Lighthouse. So, we'll be ramping up our efforts on Beacon Fuzz starting from next week, allocating more time and resources. So far, since the last update, we've managed to clean up the fuzzing targets that are no longer relevant. So we've just basically got rid of the function of the fuzzing targets that are no longer in the spec. We've also added a couple more block state transitions to our fuzzers. So, in fact, good news, all the block state transitions are now included in Beacon Fuzz, which is cool. And we've also added 2 epoch state transition functions that are up and running locally on my machine at the moment. So looking at process rewards and penalties and process slashings. We have been working on integrating other implementations as well. So we've reached out to a couple of you folks. So as a reminder, currently Beacon Fuzz works fully supports PySpec, ZRNT, and Lighthouse. We've reached out to Prism. The build process is not, very straightforward, but we got there in the end. Happy to say that Prism is now integrated, but unfortunately, we're facing issues since we're having now 2 Go implementations. So we're facing a bunch of namespace clashes. So we've reached out to Proto, who's providing us with a bunch of different, I guess, avenues and options that we can explore. But I'm fairly confident that we'll get there very, very soon. We've reached out to Nimbus as well. So we are, I guess, trying to see how we could produce a static C library that we could simply link to our differential fuzzer. And we started integrating Trinity as well, which should be very, very straightforward. So we started working on Prism, thinking that since we had ZRNT up and running, it would be very, I guess, trivial to add another Go implementation. Turned out to be quite the opposite because we already had the Go implementation. It's actually not as simple as expected. Next steps will be to finalize all the epoch state transitions. So that should be done next week. We'll also bump all the current fuzzers to the latest version of the spec. Not too sure exactly what the progress is from the implementers on being compatible with 0.9.1, but I guess we'll hear an update from everyone today. And we'll also continue integrating Trinity. So hoping to have Prism, Trinity, and Nimbus up and running on Beacon Fuzz by the next update. Thank you.
Thanks, Mehdi. Really appreciate y'all taking that on. Any other testing updates? Great. I know there is a desire and even a need for fork choice tests. That's been on the back burner for us for a while, and need to prioritize it. I'll try to get some at least notes for review up on that within the next week. Cool. I guess the good thing is that some of these corner cases and things that we've integrated into the spec recently are those. They are corner cases and not expected to be seen, especially on test nets and even primarily not even seen on mainnets. Okay, so let's move on to client updates. We can start with Prismatic.
Yeah, hey guys, this is Terrence from Prismatic. So we relaunched our test net with version 0.9 last week. So there has been lots of public interest. There are currently 55 peers right now, and only 10 of them are ours. So it's definitely great to see that we have lots of external users trying it out. Also, with that, it also comes with lots of questions, support, and great feedback from the community. So we have been improving upon those feedback and then also improving upon our testnet stability. And then we have lots of bug fixes on the RPC backend because there's two Beacon block explorers using them right now. So we have been fixing the RPC backend as well. And on the side, we're working on aggregator as a role because previously for us, every validator aggregate and then we broadcast the attestation. So we're switching to this aggregator selection logic as from the version 0.9 spec. We're making SSD performance improvements right now because it's one of our bigger bottleneck during syncing. Also, we're revamping the ETH1 data implementation logic. Preston had a few questions on that, so definitely good to see that happening. And then we also recently finished our fully end-to-end test from depositing the deposit contract, and then from validating submitting deposit transaction, and then finalizing epoch. So thanks to Ivan on that. And yeah, that's about it.
Great, thank you, Terrence. So that current testnet does not use aggregation, as I think you said.
It does aggregation, but right now, every validator is an aggregator.
Okay, I see. Great. Have you put the um, the configuration of that testnet into that shared repo with any notes about it?
Not yet, but it should be the same as minimum config, with the exception of shorter ETH1 data duration and the higher ejection values.
Okay. If and when you get a chance, dropping it in there, just us getting in the habit of kind of documenting these nets so that we can begin to do some more experimentation would be good.
Sounds good.
Thanks, Terrence. Um, Lighthouse.
Yep. Sorry, wasn't quite ready for that. All right, so we got version 0.9 I think 1 whatever merged, which is pretty good. We're working on our hot cold database because there were some slight changes that affected it. We have implemented a validator onboarding flow. So it's roughly use the CLI to generate keys and deposit data. And we have a very simple single page web app that uses MetaMask to create the deposit. Where we have a testnet running in the cloud with orchestration and monitoring. We're just not quite ready to push it to the public yet because we want to finish our documentation, and we're really keen to get the hot cold database in there before we make it public, just so we're not filling up people's machines. We're also working on refactoring our validator client. We're doing quite a big refactor of it. We're focusing on async operations, and we're putting in some new slashing protection stuff. And we're also doing some aggregation in the validator client. So if you're running very large numbers, like tens, hundreds of thousands of validators in one machine, this should make it much easier for your beacon node to handle it. Some might say that we're just trying to beat NIM in the next round of who can run the most validators, but I wouldn't say that. We're also working with Harumi with their fast VLS implementation, but we're still going to keep working on ours just for the sake of diversity. I think we might kind of put them behind compile flags kind of see how they go. Because Heroom is fast and extremely impressive, but it is inline assembly, so it's a tiny bit scary, but very, very, very much cool. From the networking side, we've started working on noise handshake in libp2p. We've added Sybil resistance to the DHT, and we're focusing on a testing effort to test all the network components, which is not trivial, but something we definitely have to do. That's it from me.
Thank you, Paul. How about Lodestar?
I think I'm only one from the Lodestar, so I guess I'll deliver the update. So the most important part, we implemented all the Carl's apes in JavaScript, and we are currently testing it across the environments, and we'll release it soon. We also made a huge progress on disk v5 in JavaScript, and our 0.9 spec is pretty much done. We're just waiting the next release of JSLib2p because it introduces the ASIC iterators and stuff, which is kind of needed for that spec version. And that's pretty much everything that I can remember. I wasn't really expected to be delivering the update.
All good. Thank you. Felix had a question for you, Paul. Wait, how did you add Sybil resistance to the DHT?
That's one for Adrian.
Hey, yeah, I think if it's for Felix, then on the DSV5, there was a few suggestions, but essentially we limit the IP addresses on a -24 subnet. So in a particular bucket, I think we only allowed 2 -24 subnets, and in the entire, like on the same -24 subnet, and then in the entire DHT, we limit the number of IPs on a -24 subnet.
Oh, very cool. Thank you. Okay.
Thanks. Okay, Nimbus.
Hi. For the core testnet parts, we cleaned up leftover from the 0.8.x spec, so sharp crosslink. We have now a weekly testnet setup in place. So we reboot the testnet every Tuesday morning, and it's stable for a week. We merge, we have a separate devil branch, and we merge everything on Monday. So you can use that as a stable branch to compare to Nimbus. Regarding the spec, we are now compatible with 0.9.1. We're waiting for 0.9.2. And we verified that we have the same genesis as ZCLI 0.9.1. And so that will be deployed on the testnet next Tuesday. We do have a complex sync issue that is being debugged, and we are working on better logs because, going through all the logs is quite stressing for setup and even for us. Regarding crypto and BLS, I did some benchmark of Eremi BLS on a Raspberry Pi without OpenSSL and GMP, so it was 21 milliseconds for pairing. Otherwise, our next to-do is working with Sigma Prime on beacon fuzz, so probably we'll add some hooks to NCLI so that it's easy to call or to maybe produce a C API for fuzzing. On the networking front, we're working, always on disk v5, a native one. And side note on Eth2.0 so Nimbus Eth2.0, we finished the Istanbul hard fork implementation, and we started working on a Go wrapper to switch part of the status client to Nimbus Eth2.0 instead of Geth. And that's all from me.
Great, thank you. And those testnets that you are rebooting every week, is that something that the public can join?
Yes, that's the idea.
Thank you. Oh, one more question. In the 091, are y'all using the aggregation strategy specified?
No, we don't have the aggregation strategy yet. One thing also is that while we pass the minimal tests, we still have some issues with.
Gotcha. Thank you. Wei is here. Parody.
Yeah, so for party, we are mostly doing some optimization work for beacon chain and for the beacon state transition implementation, and mostly I think the current focus is to try to revive the subject runtime, which was unfortunately removed in the past due to the spec changing too quickly and also subject changing too quickly. So we try to catch up with the schedule by removing that. But I think right now it's really important we revive that, and the goal is to hopefully first make a bridge, and second hopefully make sure the some of the components, like this time we try to build it in the using the substrate runtime module, which is now called plates, to try to hopefully also produce something useful for the runtime modules. And yeah, I think that's all for us.
Great, thank you, Wei. Trinity.
Hey everyone. So mainly working on spec updates and performance to various bits. So that'd be like the version 0.91 updates, which are mostly all together. There's really just some refactoring we had to do on the fork choice that's blocking being fully up to date there. Although I do believe we're passing all of the fixtures, the spec test that is. Some other things, updates to pilot P2P stability. We merged in our ETH1 monitor. Some great performance work on PySSZ, which had been a big bottleneck for us. And then we've started work on attestation aggregation.
Cool, thanks, Alex. Artemis.
Hi. So we're split into two teams now. We're kind of working in one team we're calling advanced research, which is what we're kind of like combining with Harmony. We're going to be working on the shard client, have been working on the shard client. And we have another team working on Artemis that's working on kind of like production readiness. And they're kind of making some changes and implementing sync right now. So,
Great.
Shohan says he'll give the update for them. So.
Cool.
Hey all, on the Artemis side, we've finished 0.90, and we are just finalizing the naive aggregation stuff, and then we'll take a look at 9.1 right after 0.9.1. We've got all the request response methods done to at least basic functionality. We're just finalizing a review, and then we're also starting a round of interop testing with other clients. If there are clients that have Docker images published, that would be very handy for us to help on our interop testing. We're also starting to investigate block sync approaches, especially prismatics. And we're also working on this v5, focused on the interop side of that. And that's it for our update.
Great, thanks, Shohan. And Meredith, I saw your question in the chat, and I'll get to the detail there, but it is a function of the size of the validator set. I don't know if that is explicitly written down anywhere, but we can. But specifically, sorry, this is the weak subjectivity period, and how it's dynamic. For many use cases of the weak subjectivity period, we would instead just rely upon some sort of upper bound rather than using, even if it drops lower, for the safety and health of the network, it's just much simpler to err on the side of conservative on it. But I will drop some more notes on that after this call.
Awesome, thanks.
Yeah, and Harmony.
there is a little progress being done on Gossip Sub simulation. This simulator now able to handle 100,000 of nodes and disseminate a message within in a sane amount of time. Further steps are to add mesh topology and add metrics like bandwidth and so forth to this piece of software. Next, we did a partial update of the spec to 0.9, and this is within our work on the fork choice tests. We are about to finish these fork choice tests for our code base, and it's good to know that you, Danny, are going to have some updates.
Yeah, let's sync on
the fork
that.
choice. Yeah, sure. We probably can use our code to generate some basic test vectors. Also, there is a work near to be finished with the disk-V5. It's now been tested with the Geth, some like rich interop stuff that Dmitry is working on. I guess he's going to finish it this week. Also, I've made a write-up about session condition detection. It's compiled from the ideas that previously been posted by Proto and by Danny and some other stuff that I've been thinking about around, and yeah, it's like contains some also estimation of sizes of the indexes and could be useful for those who are designing this part of the client. I'll post it like tomorrow, I guess. I need to do some polishing, and there is no much progress on our side these 2 weeks as we spent some cycles on merging teams. Yeah, next couple of weeks gonna be more productive. Thanks, everyone.
Great, thanks, Mikhail. Okay, I think I hit everyone, right?
Yes, thanks.
Great. Okay, we'll move on to some quick research updates. Vitalik, you want to start us off?
One second, there we go.
What? Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, great. Let's see, I guess on the protocol side, phase one, and we've done some edits to the phase one spec, and Proto has been doing some work on kind of plugging it into all of the testing machinery. And I don't think there's been kind of too many changes. Mostly kind of a lot of kind of fairly small tweaks. The one thing that continues to kind of not be done in fraud proofs, and for me that's basically just kind of waiting on the phase one design kind of being accepted by more people. One thing that we did talk about is like blocks containing multiple chunks versus the ability to kind of create multiple blocks in one slot. And I'm like, basically the idea there is to just collapse the two-dimensional array into one, and like that's simpler in some ways, but it's also more complex and kind of less data efficient in other ways. But it does still kind of feel like there might be an opportunity to kind of conceptually simplify things quite a bit. And otherwise, it's the main thing that kind of still could be added on is one, fraud proofs, and the other proofs of incorrect proof of custody bits, which are not too difficult because it's only a single round game. But there's still a kind of economic incentive nuances there to think about. I've been getting the feeling from kind of conversations with other people in the Eth2 groups that like, people believe more and more that data availability proofs actually like are something important and are not just a kind of optional extra to throw on at some point. Like people are basically actually afraid of the possibility that committees will break if breaking committees can cause the entire chain to finalize something invalid. And phase one has been designed kind of from the start with phase two or with the data availability proofs in mind. So the main reason why blocks have multiple chunks instead of one root is so that that way it makes it easier to kind of combine all of those pieces together into a single big root. And that but in order but then after that there's the question of like what specific data availability scheme do we use, and the two realistic alternatives seem to be either something fraud proof based or something Stark based. And there was a version of something fraud proof based that I coded up like almost a year ago, and it would need to be updated for things like generalized indices and so forth, but it theoretically exists. And the Stark based one is kind of protocol wise conceptually simpler, except there's this one kind of very self-contained, much more complex piece, which is actually proving this and verifying this Stark. But the main challenge there is we need to just make sure we have a decent Stark friendly hash function. And for on the hash function side, there is also one other nuance, which is basically, do we go with a binary field based hash or a prime field based hash? And if we go with a binary field based hash, then like there's no problems. But on the other hand, like Stark people have been mostly focusing on prime fields rather than binary fields, so we risk kind of being left out of infrastructure. And on the prime field based side, the challenge is basically that the like 2 to the 256 size of a chunk doesn't perfectly match up with any particular prime modulus. The the one trick I came up with to try to alleviate that is that blocks would basically come with a tag that just says like what number you should offset everything by. And if you do that, then like with high probability, you will be able to always find a tag that works. And well, with high probability, the first tag you randomly choose will be a tag that works. So the idea there would be to just kind of rotate every leaf so that none of um, none of the leaves fall into like that tiny small range that's not covered by whatever's like prime right slightly below to the 256 you choose. So that would needs to be kind of put into SSZ in some form. So I think next steps would be to kind of, I mean, one of them I know is that Yankered wants to prototype the Stark-based stuff and kind of see how like actually viable it is in a bytes per second sense. And otherwise, there's the option of just like figuring out how to kind of slot like whatever version of the proof it is, how to slot it in correctly. Yeah, those are the main kind of protocol level things from my side so far, and otherwise my own time personally, I've been spending it on some application layer questions in the last week as well.
Cool. Thank you, Vitalik. Those Stark-friendly hash functions that we're relying upon, those have not yet been vetted by the community, right? of cryptographers.
Correct. I mean, this is basically like the entire reason why things like our Stark-friendly hash function and our grant to Starkware and all of these other kind of things that have been in motion for over a year exist. And they've provided some kind of candidates that we can use with medium confidence right now, but I mean, in general, people like there's also desire to be conservative and like wait until functions are properly vetted and all of those things.
Okay, thank you. There was a question from the chat. Any news on the ITF forum in which the BLS standardization was formally proposed? Carl, do you have any updates on that?
Yes, I wanted to talk about that in my update. So yesterday morning, Chris Wood presented the hash to curve at the ITF meeting. It was mostly sort of just an update, I guess, for those people, explaining the changes that have gone in since the last meeting, which I believe was at V3. So that was V4 and V5 that were explained. And then some questions around where to go from here. And all in all, looks very good. No one raised any issues, which was sort of the precondition on making this a blockchain standard. So in terms of the hash to curve itself, the next things that are happening is the Sage proof of concept, which is sort of the master implementation that's being used to generate the test vectors, which were removed for V5. So adding the test vectors back in, making sure all the canonical implementations of hash to curve are good again, which are the ones in Go, Rust, and C that they've written, which should all happen in the next 2 weeks or so. But those aside, there should be no surprises there, so it's not really like we need to wait for anything. So that means that they're going to move this onto last call status from an IETF standpoint, and it'll be submitted to the CFRG for input on the cryptography. But again, nothing expected there. That's more formality, I think, from my understanding.
How long is last call?
That's still much longer. So that's for waiting for this to be a proper standard. In my view, that's just 6 months out or something.
Okay.
So it's not something we should be waiting for. And as a blockchain standard, the sort of agreement we reached on the last call we had was a much shorter timescale. So basically, after this meeting, if no one raised anything, which no one did, so with the reservation that nothing's been said, we haven't had proper discussions about this since the IETF meeting, and we don't have any like formal written agreements that this is a standard. I'm reasonably happy to declare this to be the BLS standard going forward, and don't really expect anything to change there aside from the addition of more test vectors, which is always a good thing. So yeah, I think for the most cases, then it's fair to say that the BLS thing is not really holding us back, aside for coming to proper agreement that this is a standard. But I'll only know more after our next internal meeting, which is happening, I believe, in about 2 weeks' time. But for now, I think we can basically think of it as a standard.
Great. And is there a PR up for review in the specs repo?
There's the Kirk's PR up for review, and I've been through it. That looks pretty good for the. That you're just updating the hash to curve to V5. It leaves some of the definitions in the specifications of the in the RFC specification. So I don't know whether we want to take those out and sort of explain them again in pseudocode or Python in the specs or not.
Right.
But what is there is good.
Okay. Thank you,
from what I can see. So yeah, exciting progress there. Things already looking up.
Any other updates on your end?
No, I'm going to squash all the commits on those EIPs and hopefully get those merged in this week.
Great, and those EIPs are the key derivation standards, right?
Yeah, 23, 33, 34, and 35.
Great.
And just that's if you want to know exactly what's happening, you can check that out.
Yeah, we have a PR waiting to land with those key store implementations. That's been great. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome.
Cool. Thank you very much for the appreciated update. Any other research updates?
I have a few updates. So
Great.
relevant for phase 0, I guess, is the Ethereum Foundation is kind of looking for someone to, manage the validators that we're gonna run. So part of the plan is for part of the ETH that the Ethereum Foundation holds to be validating. So we're looking for someone to, with DevOps skills, with operational security skills to help set up kind of a high uptime, high resiliency, high security kind of setup. Potentially multi-client, multi-cloud, potentially even using the threshold BLS signatures, and provide all this infrastructure as open source. Potentially being complementary to institutional grade infrastructure that Coinbase might provide. So if you know anyone who might fit the bill, please send me a message. Wait, I think we actually have a DevOps team, right? Like, I mean, there's an existing team that could do this. Yes. Right. So, I mean, we could either use the DevOps team if they have additional bandwidth, and if it's appropriate, we can also look outside. I guess, it's not mutually exclusive. Relevant for potentially phase 1. I mean, I've been spending quite a bit of my spare time on zero knowledge proofs, and one of the cool things that Dan Bonnet came up with a really neat secret leader election mechanism, and he wrote a paper, and his paper got accepted, so it will be published very soon. And it turns out that kind of the circuit is very simple. So you could do it either with zero knowledge proof, or you could do it as a fraud proof, kind of very similar to the data availability situation. And of course, if we can do it with a zero knowledge proof, it's cleaner. And it turns out that in this specific instance, it's potentially very clean to do it, and very doable to do it with zero knowledge proof. And then kind of relevant to phase 2 and kind of giving a little bit more details on the Stark friendly and the Snark friendly hash functions. So there's been one of the candidate hash functions in the competition that was broken, the GMMC. So there's kind of 2 of the more experimental ones that remain, Rescue and Poseidon. But the kind of the bad news is that the cryptanalysts in the committee, so there was a committee that reviewed these hash functions, they still think that it will take years for these hash functions to be very thoroughly vetted, and for us to have very high confidence. So actually one of the hash functions which we do have available is the Peterson hash, which is kind of provably secure under kind of kind of under trusted assumptions. So one of the things that would also be worthwhile is kind of looking at the performance of Peterson hashes, both in the plain text, because it is significantly slower than SHA-256, but also in the context of a zero knowledge proof.
Another alternative to kind of hashing backstops, by the way, is to kind of bring back multi-hashing. So basically, like at least for shard blocks, they would provide both the regular hash route and the like mimc hash root or whatever hash function root that we have, and then you would have a fraud proof to show like basically that one doesn't actually lead to the other, and so that way we can kind of benefit from the data availability checking conditional on that hash function working, but we also have the like hash chains that are backed by what SHA-256.
Right. Although Dankad wasn't totally convinced that this is necessarily kind of a strict security upgrade, but I guess it's a discussion to be had offline.
I get like what is the argument? I'm wondering.
Well, basically, I think he's saying that if the hash function is broken, then basically you can trick light clients and.
You won't be able to trick light clients because light clients would ask for branches that go through the roots that go through the traditional hash. Like if the hash function is broken, the only thing you'd be able to do, I think, is get away with unavailable data if you can get a committee to sign off on it.
Right. So if the committees are compromised and the hash function is compromised, then you don't gain any.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, let's keep moving. Anything else, Justin? Cool. Will.
Hey, what's up, everyone? So we're starting a phase 2 community call December 3rd. So I put up an issue in the PM repo, and recently released a update on everything up until this point. So you guys are all interested in progress and what's been going on. Definitely recommend you you read through the article. We had an implementation this last week of basically a runtime API. So this is the sandboxing API for calling new WASM runtimes, and host functions that support this, and run them in a protected manner. So now we're prototyping a smart contract execution environment, and we'll go ahead and get some basic smart contracts running for that. We've been expanding Scout to test across multiple shards. So this is perfect in tandem with the smart contract EE. We'll be able to start testing contracts that are shard aware. We're continuing to optimize the token EEs. And again, in the update, I think I talk about like 6 token EE implementations that were going on in parallel, and also continuing to work on making the some of the accumulator implementations more performant as well.
A question for you, Will. What language do you use for the smart contract?
So specifically the smart contracts that will be called will be in WASM, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, it's because we have a proof of concept with a name to WASM to write smart contracts, but we are looking for new targets, like what VM we can use it for. And if we can use it for Ethereum too, that would be very nice.
Awesome. Yeah, that'll be cool. We'll play with that. I think for the most part, the contracts that we'll write will be put together in assembly script and or Rust. those are what we're playing with initially, and then having those compiled down into WASM. Yeah, does that answer?
Yes, if we can find the contract original one in Rust or assembly script, we can just replicate it in NIM, see that we generate something executable that is almost the same, and this way we can have, well, it will be a bit like Viper in terms of interface, and that we can use it for phase 2 for testing also.
Awesome. Yeah, let's do that. So I'll share with you as we get this working, and then we should try and write one as well. And yeah, cool.
Great, thanks, Will. Other research updates. Okay. Moving on, I want to announce and let y'all be aware of there are some new domain-specific calls. I think the particular cadence of these calls is still TBD. Likely once a month to start, but might, depending on progress and things, might swap to be quicker. So there's the ETH1X, there's a research call. They're primarily organizing on the ETH Research Forum, so if you're interested, check that out. It's pretty much a revitalization of an effort to push forward on some of the research on the existing Ethereum chain, with a focus on getting improving Ethereum today, and also staging Ethereum for the future upgrade of moving Ethereum into ETH2, moving more towards a stateless model and other things. So if you're interested, check that out. Like I said, they're organizing a lot on the ETH Research Forum. Will announced phase 2 call. I dropped the link in the chat. In addition to that, we're going to start an at least monthly networking call where a member or two from each team, I hope, that has been focused primarily on networking, we're going to gather together, enumerate the problems more explicitly, and work on driving that effort a little bit more explicitly. I'm going to lead that call to start, but certainly I'm open to not leading that call, depending on who steps up and is available. I will drop an agenda item on the ETH2 PM repo, an issue that will set up this call. It might be next week, but it's Thanksgiving in the US, so if not, it will certainly be the following. Any questions or thoughts on that particular item? Okay, cool. And obviously, I don't want to induce an incredible amount of coordination overhead for adding all of these calls. If they are experiments, and if they're valuable, we'll continue doing them. Great.
Hey, Danny, one more call.
Yeah.
The
Oh,
client
yes, absolutely. I'm sorry. Cayman, yes. As I dropped in the ETH2 quick update yesterday, there is the Light Client Task Force, which has another call coming up in the first week of December.
That's right. Yeah, Wednesday. So we're gonna be 23 hours before this next call. So the next ETH2 implementers call.
Great. Thank you. And I mean, as ETH2 progresses, ETH2 covers an increasingly large domain and an increasingly large number of participants. So hopefully with these domain-specific calls, we can kind of rally the effort and capture the complexity. Okay, moving on to networking. Felix is here. How's it going, Felix? Any updates on your end?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, there are no updates since the last 2 weeks because I was really busy with like Geth-related tasks. One thing that might be of interest to the Prismatic team is that we just converted the Go Ethereum codebase to use Go modules, which means it's actually much easier to, it should be much easier to actually consume Go Ethereum as a dependency now. And I'm looking to include the this v5 code on the Go Ethereum master branch as soon as possible. So I think that's going to be a big help to anyone using Go, because then you can just import it directly from the upstream.
Felix,
yeah,
go on.
And then apart from that, what we also like this, not directly related to Eth2, but it might become like interesting to Eth2 in the future, is since the Istanbul hard fork is coming up on the Eth1 chain, everyone is upgrading their nodes, which means that we'll all of a sudden have a lot more ENR capable Eth1 nodes around, and we want to leverage that by building a running a DHT crawler that collects all of these ENRs and makes them available through the DNS protocol. And the code for this is done. Like, we have the crawler and we have like all of the infrastructure to make use of it right now. We're just waiting for people to basically upgrade so we can actually set this up. And then I guess we'll have something to announce there like after the fork passes. And I think this is going to be a pretty good test run of this like DNS infrastructure. And I think it's probably going to be really nice for Eth2 as well once it launches.
Awesome. On Disk V5, I know there was talk about integration of a proof of work or looking into other techniques for adding some sort of DOS resistance. Is there any update on that?
No, so I haven't received like any feedback on the spec in the last 2 weeks. I'm not sure. Maybe anyone could comment. Like, I mean, I hear a lot of updates on this call, on the two implementers call, and I'm really happy to hear that people are actually implementing it. It's just that like I'm not really in contact with anyone, so it just all seems to like work without my involvement, which is very nice. But at the same time, there are research challenges left for this protocol, and I'd also be really happy to like get more help on that. Like, it shouldn't just be me, I think. So kind of, yeah, I mean, it's nice that everyone is implementing it. I'm really happy about that. I can really say that, but it's just like, it would be nice if like there was more involvement in the open research questions that are left. There are not that many questions left actually, and they're all on the GitHub tracker. So like, I'm also happy to have calls about this at any time, or like,
Yeah, cool. Thank you, Felix. Networking experts provide feedback and input. And like I said, we're going to have a networking call coming up, and we can more explicitly rally around some of these problems.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, Felix. Other networking updates. On the Harmony simulations, when are y'all expecting to publish some results from that?
I think the basic results should be published like in the end of next week. I mean, the results we're just going to publish this basic simulator stuff. Get a feedback from protocol labs, from Proto, who is willing to do aggregation simulation. Yeah, then move forward. Like,
cool. Thank you. other networking updates? Okay. Spec discussion. Proto dropped an issue yesterday evening, or whenever that was, discussing some of the pain points with the disparity between hash tree root and signing root. Proto, would you like to talk about that?
Hey, hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay. So signing root is kind of this pain because there's all these multiple different domains. There's the light client work, networking, this flexibility of being able to convert signing root or a root of just a message into a full hash tree root that includes the signature. And then there's tree-based state representation, which like kind of closely connects with light client work, but also with SSE caching work and reduction of state representation. So you can store the state in some kind of Merkle store to serve light client with, for example. All these kinds of things, they're blocked or very inconvenient because of the way you have these two different kinds of roots that map to different tree structures. And I outlined this in more detail in the issue. And I'm sure there are even more like edge cases and things to consider here. So I'd like to have more feedback about this proposal to remove signing root, or alternatively, there are other workarounds, but they're not as pretty and don't cover all issues. But having some feedback here is really important, as it's close to something that's frozen, but itself is not quite frozen. So I do think it's worth the discussion, and hopefully, like with more feedback, I'll put together a PR describing the changes. And then by the next call, I'd like to make a discussion, a decision as a group of implementers on what we should do and if we should remove it or if there's better ways to do with it.
Thanks, Proto. Do y'all have any questions or comments for him other than just digging into the issue that he posted?
Hey, also want to add on to this. So, Ro from Prismatic Labs here. Signing root as a name is also can be a little bit confusing, like to somebody that's not deeply familiar with its purpose or the Eth2 spec. So, yeah, I agree that it's worth revisiting. Also, it doesn't make sense that only some like to an external implementer, like why some types have signing root and some others don't. So there's a lot that can be done to explore alternatives. I like Proto's alternative of having like a sign block container and like also regular block container. And he mentioned the point that it could just really remove remove a lot of complexity that exists regarding like dealing with latest block headers and things like that in the state. So that could be very helpful.
Thanks, Raul. I need to.
There are a lot of benefits to be had for just a little bit more verbosity in the spec. And I do think even that can be really minimal, as you really just need one wrapper type to say, hey, there is this signed version of the container with the signature. And that's pretty much it.
Actually, there's something that we wanted to do in Nimbus once the spec stabilizes, because we have issues with on the test suite with tests that are using dummy signatures, and we need some kind of workaround around that. I guess having a sign type and something separated would be much easier, even for testing.
Right, and then there's something to networking as well. Jacek commented on that. And then there are considerations for how you deal with the typing structure as a server for light clients, as a light client to consume approved. Take a look, and then we'll discuss more next call. Thank you.
Thanks, bro. Other spec-related items anyone wants to talk about? Okay, I have the next item in there was general discussion of testnets. I think the status is very similar to 2 weeks ago. There is the prime focus for most clients is getting public versions of the testnets out and or joining other public testnets. There's obviously some really good movement on that with Prismatic relaunching their testnet. And with, I know, a couple of other clients very near that. Oh, and Nimbus doing their weekly builds. But it seems like we need, there's still work to do before we orchestrate a larger scale multi-client public effort. Are there any other thoughts, comments, discussion, questions about this week? Great. Okay. The last item, open discussion. Any closing remarks? Anything anyone wants to get out?
I have a question about weak subjectivity period. Weak subjectivity period size comes from a Casper FFG paper, and I'm wondering if we are like tightly coupled with the size computation that we have so far. Does it that big to prevent long-range attacks only, or there is some other implications here?
The weak subjectivity period. Yes, so then there are calculations. I made an ETH post about this of like basically how long the weak subjectivity period is based on like the rate at which people can withdraw. And the current the withdrawal period is right now it's a maximum of 8 months in the worst case. Like in the normal case, when almost no one is withdrawing, you get out after about 2 days. And then in the case where there is a small amount of ether, then the maximum also drops to try to kind of compromise and encourage more people to join in. And in terms of why that exists, and one part of it is because it determines like how often people need to come online to get the security guarantee. Another aspect is that it determine like basically if the weak subjectivity period gets too short, then people who did bad things might end up not getting slashed. So it's both of those things put together.
Vitalik, do you usually define the period as the time in which it takes
so I think
a third or full?
I think mathematically speaking, it would have to be the period that it takes for a third to exit.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there is that ETH research post. Let me see. I'm gonna go search it up right now. Weak subjectivity withdrawal queue. I wrote about this. Okay, so there's number 4942, but no, that's that one's like not detailed enough. Hold on. Site ETH research. Oh, it's called weak subjectivity under the exit queue model 5187.
Okay, thanks, Vitalik. I'll take a look at this. I was just wondering if we can cut it down by half, for example, and whether it just breaks long-range attack defense or breaks something else.
To break what down by half, the maximum or the amounts?
So I guess there's the maximum.
And then there's the
and then there's kind of
withdrawal Q rate of 4 per epoch, I think. It's
But then they're really like the effective weak subjectivity period is the period in which the network is actually policing, right? Which could be up to the maximum theoretical or below.
Yeah. So I guess the maximum. Okay. So the maximum withdrawal period is theoretically 8 months, but that would only happen if like literally everyone tries to exit at the same time. And then the amount that you would need to log on would basically be like once every, I guess, 8 months divided by 3. Let's see how many would need to get slashed. It's yeah, and that's also the worst. And then the 8 months is the worst case, and like in the average case, we need to wait much less. And we did some simulations on this.
Right.
Okay, cool.
Cool. Other questions regarding this, or just anything during our last open discussion period? Okay. I know y'all are all pretty heads down working on these things. I think we're also entering into a period where it's very important to communicate with the community. So I've started doing those quick updates, but updates from your individual teams on how to better understand your clients and get involved with testnets are always extremely appreciated by the community. So don't forget to write. Thank you. Keep your eyes peeled on the Eth2.0 repo. I will drop details about that first networking call. And I believe we will do this call in 2 weeks. I'll post an agenda for that soon. Thank you, everyone. Talk to y'all soon.
Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Bye
everyone.
bye.
Thanks all.
Bye.
See ya.
Bye.